The hospital smelled like disinfectant and something else, something darker. Blood, mud, fear, things that didn't wash out no matter how much they scrubbed. It was November 1944, a military field hospital, 30 miles behind the front lines in France, close enough to hear the artillery when the wind shifted, far enough to pretend you were safe. Ward C was for the broken ones, not the ones with missing limbs or shrapnel wounds. Those men went to other wards. Ward C was for the ones whose bodies were fine but whose minds had shattered. Shell shock, combat fatigue, battle neurosis. The doctors had different names for it, but the soldiers all knew what it really was. It was what happened when you saw too much, when you did too much, when the part of you that made you human just stopped working. Lieutenant James McCready was in bed 7, 22 years old, from a small town in Iowa. Cornfields, church on Sundays, a girl named Sarah, who wrote him letters that he didn't read anymore. He'd been in France for 4 months, landed at Normandy on D-Day +3, made it through the hedgerows, made it through the liberation of Paris, made it all the way to a village called Hurtgen Forest. Then something happened. Nobody knew exactly what. The men in his unit said he'd been fine one moment, leading his squad through the trees, calling out orders, and then he'd stopped, just stopped walking, stopped talking, stood there in the middle of the forest while mortars fell around him. His sergeant had to physically carry him back to the aid station. That was 3 weeks ago. Now he was in Ward C, bed 7, staring at the ceiling. He didn't speak, didn't eat unless someone forced him, didn't sleep, just stared. Sometimes his lips moved, like he was talking to someone, but no sound came out. The psychiatrist assigned to his case was Captain Robert Holloway, 40 years old, trained at Johns Hopkins, competent, caring, but completely out of his depth. He'd been trying to reach McCready for 3 weeks, talking to him, asking questions, trying different approaches. Nothing worked. McCready just stared at the ceiling, silent, unreachable. On November 18th, Holloway sat down next to McCready's bed, pulled up a metal chair, tried again. "Lieutenant McCready, can you hear me? I know you can. I know you're in there. I'm trying to help you, but I need you to work with me. Can you do that? Can you try?" Nothing. Just the staring, the slight movement of lips, the emptiness. Holloway sighed, wrote something in his notes, tried a different approach. "Tell me about home, James. Tell me about Iowa. What did you do there? Before the war, what did you love?" Still nothing. But then for just a second, McCready's eyes shifted, not toward Holloway, just shifted, like something inside had flickered. Holloway noticed, leaned forward. "James, what is it? What are you thinking about?" McCready's lips moved, no sound, but definite movement. Holloway watched closely, tried to read the words, tried to understand, and then he caught it. 3 words, repeated over and over. White Christmas, home. White Christmas, home. Holloway blinked. "Are you thinking about Christmas? About home at Christmas?" McCready didn't respond, but the lips kept moving. White Christmas, home. Holloway made a note, then tried something, started humming, quietly, the melody to White Christmas, Bing Crosby's song. Everyone knew it. It had been on the radio constantly for 2 years, played on Armed Forces radio, in every USO show, every Christmas since 1942. And something happened. McCready's eyes closed, not in sleep, in something else, relief maybe, or memory. The lips kept moving but slower now, more deliberate, like he was singing along, but still no sound. Holloway stopped humming. McCready's eyes opened again, back to staring, back to the ceiling, back to silence. But Holloway had seen it, the flicker, the connection. Music had reached him, for just a moment, when nothing else could. After the session, Holloway went to the nurses' station, found Nurse Eleanor Davis, 34 years old, from Philadelphia, been in France since August, seen everything, fixed everything she could, mourned everything she couldn't. She was filling out charts, looked up when Holloway approached. "I need your help with Lieutenant McCready," Holloway said. "I think I found something. Music, specifically that Bing Crosby song, White Christmas." He responds to it, just barely, but it's something. Eleanor considered this. "You want me to play music for him?" "We don't have a record player in Ward C." Holloway shook his head. "No, I want you to watch him, listen to him, See if he says anything, sings anything, even silently, just lip movements, anything musical. It might be a way in. Eleanor nodded. I can do that. She added McCready to her rounds, made a point to spend extra time near his bed, watching, listening, and on the third day, November 21st, she heard it, not with her ears, with her eyes. She was changing the bandages on the patient in bed 6 when she glanced over at McCready. His lips were moving. She stopped what she was doing, watched closely. He was singing, silently, but definitely singing. She recognized the shape of the words, White Christmas, all the way through, first verse, chorus, second verse, then starting over, again and again, like a loop, like a prayer. Eleanor finished with bed 6, walked over to McCready, sat down on the edge of his bed. Lieutenant McCready, can you hear me? He didn't respond, but the lips kept moving. White Christmas. Eleanor made a decision, started singing, out loud, softly. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. McCready stopped. His eyes shifted, looked at her, actually looked at her. First time in 3 weeks he'd made eye contact with anyone. Eleanor's heart jumped, but she kept singing, kept her voice gentle, just like the ones I used to know. McCready's lips started moving again, in sync with her now. Still no sound from him, but he was singing along. Eleanor could see it, could feel it. She kept going, through the whole song. And when she finished, McCready's eyes were wet, tears rolling down his face, still silent, but crying. Eleanor took his hand, squeezed gently. You're going to be okay. I promise, we're going to help you. She stayed with him for 10 more minutes, singing quietly, White Christmas, over and over, until her shift ended. That night, Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about McCready, about the tears, about the connection. She knew Captain Holloway was trying everything, but therapy took time, and time was something McCready might not have. She'd seen men like him before, men who retreated so far inside themselves they never came back. Some of them died, just stopped breathing one day, like their bodies forgot how. Some of them were transferred to permanent psychiatric facilities, lost forever. She thought about that song, White Christmas, about what it represented. Home, peace, safety, everything these men were fighting for, everything they couldn't have. And she thought about Bing Crosby, the man who'd sung it, the voice that had become synonymous with that longing. And then she had an idea, a crazy idea. But maybe crazy was what McCready needed. The next morning, November 22nd, Eleanor found Captain Holloway in his office. Told him about McCready singing along, about the tears, about the connection. Holloway was encouraged. Good, that's progress, real progress. We can build on that, use music therapy, maybe get him talking eventually. Eleanor nodded, but then said, what if we could get Bing Crosby here, in person, to sing for him? Holloway stared at her. You're joking. Eleanor shook her head. I'm serious. Bing Crosby does USO tours, visits troops. What if we could contact him, get him to come here, just for an hour, just to sing that song, for McCready and the other men in Ward C? Holloway leaned back in his chair, rubbed his face. Nurse Davis, do you have any idea how impossible that would be? Bing Crosby is one of the biggest stars in the world. He doesn't just show up at random field hospitals. Even if we could contact him, why would he come? For one patient? Eleanor met his eyes, because that's what he does. I've read about him. He visits hospitals, bases, anywhere soldiers are, and he doesn't do it for publicity. He does it because he cares. So what if we tried? What's the harm? Holloway considered this. He was a practical man, a scientist, but he was also a doctor who'd watched too many young men slip away. If there was even a chance that Bing Crosby could help McCready, shouldn't they try? All right, Holloway said. I'll send a request up the chain of command. See if it goes anywhere. But don't get your hopes up. The odds of this working are essentially 0. Eleanor smiled. Sometimes 0 is all you need. The request went from Captain Holloway to the hospital commander, from the hospital commander to division headquarters, from division to theater command, and from theater command to the USO office in London. It took 4 days, 4 days of bureaucracy and skepticism, and people saying this was ridiculous, but somehow, impossibly, the request landed on the desk of someone who knew Bing Crosby's tour manager. Bing was in England, had been for 3 weeks, doing shows for troops preparing for the push into Germany. He was scheduled to leave for the States on December 1st, go home for Christmas, rest, record some new songs, but on November 26th, his manager brought him a piece of paper, a request from a field hospital in France for one patient, a lieutenant who wouldn't speak, who wouldn't eat, who only sang one song, silently, White Christmas. Bing read the request twice, looked at his manager. When can we leave? The manager blinked. Leave for where? For France, for the hospital. Bing said it like it was obvious. The manager stammered. Bing, you're scheduled to fly home in 5 days. You've been over here for a month. You're exhausted. You need rest. Bing folded the paper, put it in his pocket. Cancel the flight, or postpone it. I'm going to France. The manager started to argue, stopped. He'd worked with Bing long enough to know, when Bing made up his mind, there was no changing it. 2 days later, November 28, 1944, Bing Crosby landed at a small airfield near the hospital. No press, no photographers, no announcement, just Bing, his guitar, and a determination to help a kid from Iowa who couldn't stop singing a song about snow. Eleanor was on duty when she got the message, report to the administrative building. She had no idea why, walked over expecting some paperwork issue. Instead, she found Captain Holloway standing next to a man in a simple military jacket. Casual, unassuming, but unmistakable. Bing Crosby smiled at her. You must be Nurse Davis. I hear you're the one who figured out the music thing. Eleanor couldn't speak, just stared. Holloway stepped in. Mr. Crosby flew in from England. He's here to see Lieutenant McCready and the other men in Ward C. Eleanor found her voice. You came. You actually came. Bing shrugged. Kid needs help. I've got a few hours. Seemed like the right thing to do. He said it simply. Like it was nothing. Like flying across the English Channel into a war zone to sing for one soldier was just another Tuesday. They walked to Ward C together. Eleanor, Holloway, and Bing, through the hospital corridors, past wards full of wounded men, men with bandages, men on crutches, men who would never walk again. Bing stopped occasionally, shook hands, said hello, asked names, listened to answers. He didn't perform, didn't put on a show, just talked, like a regular person. When they reached Ward C, Holloway paused at the door. Mr. Crosby, I should prepare you. These men are fragile. Some of them won't recognize you. Some of them won't respond at all. Lieutenant McCready specifically hasn't spoken in nearly a month. We don't know if he'll react to you being here. We're hoping, but we don't know. Bing nodded. I understand. Just point me to him. I'll do what I can. They entered the ward. 15 beds, 15 men, all of them damaged in ways that didn't show on the surface. Some were sleeping, some were staring, some were rocking back and forth, muttering, lost in memories that wouldn't let them go. Bed 7, James McCready, still staring at the ceiling, lips moving silently. White Christmas, home, White Christmas, home, the same loop, the same prayer. Bing walked over slowly, pulled up the metal chair, sat down, didn't say anything at first, just sat there, looking at this young lieutenant, this kid who should have been home, should have been in college, or working on a farm, or dancing with his girlfriend. Instead, he was here, broken, silent, trapped inside his own mind. After a moment, Bing spoke, quietly. Lieutenant McCready, my name is Bing Crosby. I hear you like one of my songs. No response, just the staring, the moving lips. Bing continued. That's good. I like that song too. Wrote it with a friend of mine, Irving Berlin. Smart guy, sad guy, but talented. The song means a lot to me. Sounds like it means a lot to you too. Still nothing. Eleanor stood a few feet away, watching, hoping. Holloway was beside her, taking notes, observing. Bing reached down, picked up his guitar. It was beat up, scratched, well used. He'd carried it through England, through France, through dozens of shows and hundreds of performances. He positioned it on his lap, tuned one string that had gone slightly flat, then looked at McCready. I'm going to sing it for you now, the whole thing, and I want you to know something. This song isn't just about Christmas. It's about home, about the place you come from, the place you'll go back to. Because you will go back, Lieutenant. I don't know when, I don't know how, but you will, and Sarah will be there waiting. McCready's eyes shifted, just barely, at the mention of Sarah's name. Eleanor had told Bing about her, about the letters, about the girl back home. Bing saw the shift, saw the flicker of recognition, and he started to play. The guitar was soft, gentle, not the orchestral version from the record, not the big band arrangement, just simple fingerpicking, clean notes, quiet, intimate. And then Bing's voice, that voice, warm, rich, unmistakable. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. The entire ward went still. Men who'd been muttering stopped. Men who'd been rocking stopped. Everyone capable of awareness turned toward the sound, because they knew that voice, had heard it on the radio, on records, in USO shows, but never like this, never this close, never this personal. Bing kept singing, his eyes on McCready, not performing, just singing, like he was singing to one person, because he was, just like the ones I used to know. McCready's lips were moving, in sync now, silently singing along, tears starting to form in his eyes, where the treetops glisten, and children listen to hear sleigh bells in the snow. Other men in the ward were crying now too. Bed 3, bed 9, bed 12, grown men, soldiers, warriors, crying because this song reminded them of something they'd lost, or thought they'd lost. Home, peace, innocence. Bing sang through the entire song. Didn't rush it, didn't embellish it, just sang it straight, true. When he finished, he kept playing, moved into the second verse. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas with every Christmas card I write. And this time, something miraculous happened. McCready made a sound, not loud, not clear, but a sound. His lips were moving, and there was air behind them now. Sound. Holloway's eyes went wide. Eleanor covered her mouth. Bing didn't react, just kept singing, kept his eyes on McCready, kept the connection. May your days be merry and bright. McCready's voice was getting stronger, still quiet, still rough, but there, actually there. And may all your Christmases be white. By the final line, McCready was singing out loud, barely above a whisper, but out loud. Bing finished the song, let the last chord ring out, then set the guitar down, leaned forward. Lieutenant McCready, can you hear me? McCready's eyes focused, locked onto Bing's, and for the first time in 4 weeks, he spoke, actually spoke. His voice was hoarse, broken, but words came out. I can hear you. Holloway actually gasped. Eleanor started crying. Bing just smiled, reached out, put his hand on McCready's shoulder. Good. That's real good. Now I need you to do something for me. I need you to keep talking, keep singing, keep coming back, because there are people waiting for you. Sarah, your family, your friends, they need you to come home. Can you do that? McCready nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. I can try. That's all anyone can do. Bing said, just try, one day at a time, one word at a time, one song at a time. You're going to be okay, Lieutenant. I promise. Bing stayed in Ward C for 2 hours, sang for every man who wanted to hear, not just White Christmas, everything. I'll be seeing you. Don't fence me in. Swinging on a Star, Silent Night. Some men requested songs, some men just listened, some men cried, some men smiled for the first time in weeks. There was a corporal in bed 11. Name was Danny Reeves, from Texas, hadn't spoken since October, watched Bing sing for McCready, and when Bing came over to his bed, Reeves looked up and said, "Can you sing deep in the heart of Texas?" First words he'd spoken in 6 weeks. Bing laughed, picked up his guitar, sang it, got the whole ward clapping along on the chorus. There was a sergeant in bed 4, Marcus Washington, from Chicago, had been having violent nightmares, screaming every night, waking up swinging, fighting invisible enemies. Bing sat with him, talked about Chicago, about jazz, about music, sang Stormy Weather. Washington didn't speak, but he stopped shaking, stopped looking terrified, just listened, and when Bing finished, Washington nodded, small gesture, but it meant everything. By the time Bing left Ward C, something had shifted, not dramatically, not miraculously, but definitely. The air felt different, lighter. Men were talking to each other, helping each other, remembering they were human. Eleanor walked Bing back to the administrative building. She didn't know what to say, how to thank him. Finally, she just said, "You saved his life, Lieutenant McCready. You brought him back." Bing shook his head. "I didn't save him. The song did. Music did. I was just the delivery system." He paused, then added, "And he's not saved yet. He's got a long road ahead. Therapy, recovery, healing. But he's started. That's what matters." Eleanor asked, "Why did you come? Really, you could have said no. You could have stayed in England, gone home. But you flew here. For one soldier. Why?" Bing was quiet for a moment, looking out at the hospital grounds, at the mud and the makeshift buildings, and the reality of war. Then he said, "My brother was in the First War, World War I. He came back different, damaged. We didn't have a name for it then, just called him troubled. He struggled for years, drinking, nightmares, couldn't hold a job, couldn't connect with people, and nobody helped him. Nobody knew how." He turned back to Eleanor. If someone had helped him, if someone had found a way to reach him, maybe his life would have been different. "So when I got that request about Lieutenant McCready, I thought about my brother, and I thought, if I can help one kid, just one, then I have to try." Eleanor understood. "Did your brother ever get better?" Bing's face darkened slightly. "No, he died in 1938. Officially it was a heart attack, but I think he just gave up, couldn't fight anymore." He paused. "So I come to these hospitals, sing for these boys, hope maybe I can stop one of them from giving up." They reached the building where a jeep was waiting to take Bing back to the airfield. He shook Eleanor's hand. "Then Holloway's. Take care of them, all of them. They're the bravest people I've ever met." Holloway said, "We will. And thank you. For coming. For caring." Bing climbed into the jeep, waved, and was gone. Back to England. Back to his tour. Back to his life. But he'd left something behind. Hope, connection, proof that someone cared. The next morning, November 29th, Captain Holloway did his rounds in Ward C. Started with McCready. The lieutenant was sitting up. First time since he'd arrived. He was eating. Actually eating. Small bites, but eating. Holloway sat down. "How are you feeling, Lieutenant?" McCready looked at him, eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. "Tired, confused, but here, I'm here. That's good. That's progress." Holloway paused. "Do you want to talk about what happened? In Hurtgen Forest?" McCready was quiet. Then he said, "Not yet, but maybe soon." "That's fine. We'll go at your pace." Holloway made a note. "Mr. Crosby's visit helped, didn't it?" McCready nodded. "He made me remember something. That there's still good in the world. That home still exists. I'd forgotten that. Thought I'd destroyed it. Thought I'd never be able to go back." "You can go back," Holloway said firmly. "It won't be easy. You'll have to work hard, face some difficult memories, but you can heal. You can go home." McCready looked down at his hands. "When he sang that song, when Bing Crosby sat right there and sang White Christmas, I felt something break, inside, like a wall I'd built, and it hurt. God, it hurt. But it also felt like breathing, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks and finally let it out." Holloway understood. "That's trauma releasing. That's the beginning of healing. The pain means you're feeling again, and feeling is how we heal." Over the next 3 weeks, McCready made steady progress, started talking in therapy, started processing what he'd seen in Hurtgen Forest, the friends he'd lost, the decisions he'd made, the guilt he carried. It was slow, it was painful, but it was movement, forward movement. By Christmas 1944, McCready was well enough to be transferred to a recovery facility in England. He'd spend 3 more months there, working with therapists, learning to sleep without nightmares, learning to function without fear, and in March 1945, he was cleared to return to limited duty. Not combat, he'd never see combat again, but administrative work, helping process other wounded soldiers, contributing in a way that didn't break him further. He wrote a letter to Bing Crosby, sent it through the USO, never expected a response, but in April, a letter came back, handwritten, short, but genuine. "Dear Lieutenant McCready, I'm glad to hear you're doing better. Keep singing, keep fighting, keep coming home. Your friend Bing." McCready kept that letter for the rest of his life, framed it, hung it in his study, and every Christmas, he'd play White Christmas. Remember that day in Ward C. Remember the man who'd flown across the world to sing for him. He did go home, in August 1945, after the war ended. Sarah was waiting, just like Bing had said. They got married in September, had 3 children, built a life. McCready never fully escaped what had happened in France. The nightmares came back sometimes, the memories, the darkness, but he'd learned to live with it, learned to keep fighting, learned to keep coming home.
In 1977, when Bing Crosby died, McCready was 55 years old, retired,
living in Iowa, working as a school counselor, helping kids with trauma, with pain, with darkness, using what he'd learned, giving back what had been given to him. He read Bing's obituary in the newspaper, sat at his kitchen table, and cried, not from sadness, from gratitude, because Bing Crosby had saved his life, and he'd never gotten to say thank you. Not really. Not in a way that mattered. But maybe Bing knew. Maybe all those soldiers Bing had visited, all those hospitals, all those wards, all those boys who'd been broken. Maybe Bing knew that he'd saved some of them, given them a reason to keep fighting, a reminder that home still existed. Eleanor Davis stayed in the Army Nurse Corps until 1946, worked in multiple hospitals, saw countless wounded men, saved many, lost some. After the war, she became a psychiatric nurse, specialized in trauma, in PTSD before it was called PTSD. She told the story of Bing Crosby and Lieutenant McCready to her students, to her colleagues, to anyone who would listen, because it was proof that connection matters, that music matters, that taking the time to care for one person can change everything. Captain Holloway published a paper in 1947 about music therapy for combat trauma, about the neurological effects of familiar songs, about the power of emotional connection in healing. The paper referenced an unnamed patient and an unnamed musician, but everyone who'd been at that hospital in November 1944 knew who he was talking about. The story was never publicized during Bing's lifetime. He never mentioned it in interviews, never used it for publicity. It was just one of hundreds of hospital visits, thousands of soldiers, tens of thousands of songs sung, all part of what Bing considered his duty, his contribution to the war effort. But the story survived, passed down through families, through veteran organizations, through military hospitals that kept records of visits and treatments, and slowly, over decades, people began to understand. Bing Crosby wasn't just an entertainer, he was a healer, using the only tools he had, his voice, his guitar, his willingness to show up. In 2019, James McCready died. He was 97 years old, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. In his final days, when dementia had taken most of his memories, he could still sing White Christmas, all the words, perfect pitch, like he was back in that ward in 1944, listening to Bing Crosby, learning to breathe again. His daughter found the framed letter after he died, the one from Bing. She donated it to the National WWII Museum in New Orleans, where it sits today, behind glass, a simple piece of paper, a few handwritten lines, but also evidence of something profound, evidence that in the middle of the worst war in human history, one man took the time to fly across the world to sing for one soldier. That's the story, not the grand narrative of battles and strategies, but the small story, the human story, the story of a lieutenant who broke, a nurse who cared, a doctor who tried, and a singer who showed up. White Christmas wasn't written for Lieutenant McCready. It was written by Irving Berlin as a lament for his lost son. It was sung by Bing Crosby as a commercial recording. It became a hit because it captured something universal, longing for home, for peace, for innocence. But on November 28, 1944, in a military field hospital in France, that song became something else. It became medicine. It became a lifeline. It became the thing that pulled one young man back from the edge of darkness. And maybe that's what music is supposed to do. Not just entertain, not just make money, but connect, heal, remind us that we're human, that we're not alone, that even in the darkest places, there's still beauty, still hope, still home. Bing Crosby sang White Christmas thousands of times in his life, in studios, on stages, on radio, on television. Each performance was different, each audience was different, but none of them mattered as much as the one he sang in Ward C, for 15 broken men, for one lieutenant from Iowa who'd forgotten how to speak. That performance wasn't recorded, wasn't filmed, wasn't preserved in any archive. It existed only in memory, in the minds of the people who were there. And now in this story, but it was real, it happened, and it changed lives. Lieutenant James McCready, Nurse Eleanor Davis, Captain Robert Holloway, and Bing Crosby, 4 people brought together by war and music, and the desperate need to help one person remember that home still existed. That's the power of a song, not the recording, not the sales figures, not the awards, but what it does when someone who needs it actually hears it, when it reaches into the darkness and pulls someone back into the light. On November 28, 1944, Bing Crosby flew 3,000 miles to sing for one soldier. He could have said no, could have gone home, could have rested, but he didn't. He showed up, he sang, he cared, and 75 years later, the ripples of that decision are still spreading. Through James McCready's children and grandchildren, through the students Eleanor Davis taught, through the patients Robert Holloway treated, through every person who heard this story and decided to show up, to care, to use whatever gift they had to help someone in darkness. That's the lesson. Not that music is magic, not that one song can cure trauma, but that connection matters, that showing up matters, that taking the time to care for one person, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's difficult, can change everything. Bing Crosby died on a golf course in 1977, but part of him is still alive in that hospital ward, still singing for those 15 men, still reminding them that home exists, that peace is possible, that they're not alone. And Lieutenant James McCready died in 2019, but part of him is still in that bed, still learning to breathe, still finding his voice, still coming home. White Christmas plays every year, in stores, on radios, at parties, and most people hear it as a pleasant holiday song, a nostalgic tune, a reminder of snow and presents and family gatherings. But for anyone who knows this story, it's more than that. It's proof that music can heal, that people can care, that even in the worst moments of human history, there are still moments of grace, still moments of connection, still moments when someone shows up and changes everything. That's what happened on November 28th, in a hospital that no longer exists, for a soldier whose name most people never knew, by a singer who never sought recognition. One song, 3 minutes, and a life saved. That's the real story of White Christmas, not the best-selling single, not the holiday classic, but the song that brought a broken soldier home, the song that reminded him he was still human, the song that saved his life. And somewhere, in memory, in history, in the space between notes, Bing Crosby is still singing, still showing up, still reminding us all that home exists, that we're not alone, that even in darkness, there's still light, all because one nurse cared enough to ask, one doctor cared enough to try, and one singer cared enough to fly 3,000 miles to sing for a kid from Iowa who'd forgotten how to speak. That's the power of showing up. That's the power of caring. That's the power of music. Not to entertain, but to heal, to connect, to remind us that we're human, and that home always is waiting.